Don't you hope that people will give you the benefit of the doubt in your life, in your circumstances? I know that's how I feel, but I also know that it does not come naturally for me to assume the best when things come up. It is human nature. It is hard. And that is what we are going to discuss today. Let's do it. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Culture Keepers podcast. It's me, Kara, your leadership coach, back at it again. We're going to have some conversations today that will hopefully inspire you to cultivate a thriving workplace culture for your people so that they will be happy and high-performing. Isn't that the dream? They show up to work, they love their job, and they love working for you. That is what would happen in an ideal world, and I believe we can make it happen. So let's have those conversations. Let's get into it. But before we dive right in, I am confident that you are experiencing some level of conflict at work because you have employed imperfect people. And that is what we do. We naturally breed conflict. I have a guide that is meant to help you eliminate that conflict with confidence. We want it gone. We want to handle it. We just often don't know what to do first. So I have put together a guide. This is a comprehensive guide that will take you beginning to end. It is 4 steps for you to eliminate conflict drama-free. So go ahead and grab it in the show notes or go to www.heycaralist.com/conflict. Okay, we're going to level set because assuming the best in people, as I said at the top of the episode, just does not come naturally. I mean, you could be the best person in the world. I know some amazing people who I look at and I think, oh, I just want to be like them. They are kind and humble and wise and all of the amazing character traits. But I'm confident that they still struggle with assuming the best in others. It is hard. I want you to think about the last time you were driving and someone cut you off in traffic. Some of you may have a different response to that. I personally drive like a grandma. I'm that person on the road that you're annoyed with because they're driving way too slow. And I used to drive a 93 white Grand Marquis, the boats of a car. It was my great-grandmother's car, and I inherited it when she passed away. And so I was like a 23-year-old grandma driving a grandma car on the road. Everyone was frustrated with me. But imagine that someone, like the 93 Grand Marquis, cut you off. Think about what your response is. Probably you're going to think something at best like something generally calm. At worst, you're going to say some choice words. Consider that person is a jerk. Now, I want to flip the angle. When I was in labor with specifically my first 2, my third was a little easier, but with my first 2, that drive to the airport, to the hospital while in labor was awful. It was awful because you just don't know. You're like, is this baby coming out right now? Like, are we going to have to pull over and are we going to be a YouTube sensation because we gave birth on the side of I-95? Be a terrible situation. Or is it going to be 12 hours before this baby comes? You just don't know. You just know you feel like you're dying. Your husband thinks you're dying. And you need to get to the hospital. And so your husband might make some choices when on the road. So I just remember, especially with my first, just really hoping that I didn't end up at a stoplight because I didn't want someone to pull up in the next lane and see what was happening with me in the passenger seat, which was, lots of pain. And the windows were down, and sure enough, we got at a stoplight. Someone pulls up beside, and I just see my window like slowly make its path up. Josh, my husband on the other side, had decided to do everyone a favor and lift the window. But my point is, there were circumstances inside of our vehicle that everyone else, unless they looked in and saw and made an assumption, did not know. They did not know. So if we cut someone off in traffic because we thought we saw a good opportunity to get into that lane and we just felt like we really needed to get to the hospital, those were our circumstances that we knew and no one else knew. And so what were the cars thinking? What are you thinking when someone cuts you off and you don't know the circumstances? You assume a character flaw. You assume that person is a jerk or other choice words, right? That's what you assume because you don't know the situation. And this is called the fundamental attribution error. It is an error in which we take a behavior that we see and we determine that it is a reflection of their character as opposed to a reflection of their circumstances. Other examples would be someone shows up to work late and you think all the thoughts about their work ethic or their laziness or their timeliness. But if you show up to work late, it's because you knew traffic was bad, or you knew your kid really struggled to get out of the house in the morning, or whatever your circumstances were, because you know the situations that you were in. So you don't attribute the exact same behavior to a character flaw because you know the circumstances that you were in. And that is a fundamental attribution error. And ultimately, it just leads to judgment. It causes us to make a judgment about their character. So the first thing I want you to do is take a second right now and think about a time that has happened. It happens more often than you think. Maybe you'd like to think it doesn't, but it does. If you think about a time where someone demonstrated a behavior and it caused you to think something about their character, when I actually consider how often I do this, it's not great. It's not great. But that's the first step, is acknowledging that we do it. Acknowledging that we do it. Another way we can make an assumption about someone based on their behavior without knowing the situation is that they have an intent to do us harm. They have ill intent. So there is this other adage, it's called Hanlon's razor, and it says, never attribute to malice what can be explained by neglect, ignorance, or incompetence, right? So if it can be explained by those things, then don't assume that it's malice. I have some workplace examples. Have you ever been excluded from a meeting? Or has there ever been a decision made without your buy-in, without them asking? It is very easy to assume that they intentionally left you out, that they intentionally kept you from this meeting because they don't want your opinion or because they think whatever, right? Whatever you decide in your head that is the reason that you attribute to malice. When maybe it was ignorance or neglect. They forgot, or they didn't realize you wanted to be at the meeting, or there was an incompetency there of knowing who needed to be in the meeting in the first place, or they didn't really recognize that they needed some discernment before making this decision. And by asking you or including you, that would have been the discernment they needed. It was just ignorance or incompetence, but not malice. And whereas I think that the fundamental attribution error, that assessing a character flaw, is really judgment on our part, it makes us judgy, I think this next one where we assume malice really exposes our insecurities, which again is part of being human. We are not perfect. We have these insecurities. And so by acknowledging that this is happening, it doesn't fester. It doesn't start this awful train of thought that can take us to bad places. So when a behavior shows up in a person, let's not attribute it to a character flaw or attribute it to malice. Let's acknowledge that there's a doubt. We talk about giving the benefit of the doubt. Let's just acknowledge that there's a doubt. And that is our first step. The second step is to not think that we know what we actually don't know. We rarely have all of the facts that our assumptions claim. And we know this is true of humans, of the way we think, because you see it played out in like mystery shows or crime shows. I think about like Law and Order, or I think about Scooby-Doo. I think that Scooby-Doo and Law and Order are just like, they're like mirror things, just the kid version and the adult version. And here's why I think that. The thing happens, the crime happens, the mystery needs to be solved. And for the majority of the show, they lead us to believe that it is this person, that is this character who committed the crime. They reveal to us different circumstances that would cause us to make a character judgment about that person and cause us to assume that person had ill intent. That's what they do. They lead us through this process. And then most often what happens is there's a plot twist at the end. Surprise, it wasn't actually that guy. It was this guy the whole time. And we made all those assumptions because we didn't know all of the facts. But the good news is Shaggy, Ice-T, the heroes of the story, they figure it out because they investigate. They realize that those people should be innocent until proven guilty, and they set out, regardless of what the circumstances might make us think about character or intent, and they set out to prove them innocent. And they succeed. And in turn, we see it was this guy, this girl, this person the whole entire time. And this is not a mistake that shows are built like this, even at a young age and at an older age, because this is how our mind operates. They have bought in to the way we think, the way we make judgments, and they produce shows in light of it. So we just can't claim to know what we don't know. When that person shows up late to the staff meeting and we make that judgment, we make that assumption, we just can't know unless we know. And we are so good at convincing ourselves that we have deduced correctly, right? Like we're so good at being like, no, but we do know. Well, do you? Do you know? My kids had some friends over recently, and they believe that one of the friends stole a quarter from my 5-year-old's money jar. Stole a quarter. Serious crime happening in the List home. So they started to make judgments about this kid, and they started to talk about this kid negatively. And so I asked, did you see him steal the coin? And my 8-year-old said, no, but I know he did it. How do you know? Because I saw him holding the coin. Oh, did you see him put it in his pocket? He said, no, but I know he did it. And I had to remind him, like, buddy, you can't make a judgment about this kid's character because you do not know all the facts. You cannot tell me that with your own eyes, you saw this person take a quarter and put it in their pocket. Also, we have no history of those kinds of things happening with this friend. Like, we have no reason to believe that that is the case. This does not have to be taught. This thinking the worst, not even thinking not the best, but thinking the worst. It does not have to be taught. This is just the way we are. So let's not assume or claim to know what we don't know. So obviously, if there's a pattern of behavior, if that person is showing up late to the staff meeting over and over and over again, then it might be a character issue, right? It might be a diligence issue. And so I'm not saying that this is never the case, that people never have ill intent or there's never a character flaw involved in the behavior that we see. But we can assume the best until we know otherwise. And if we start to see a pattern of behavior, we can investigate it and handle it appropriately. So I want to make sure I'm clear in saying if there is a pattern of behavior, it is neglect on your part to not address it. That is not being a culture keeper. That is why I have a conflict resolution guide that you can take that I talked about earlier for you so that you can take action to handle that. So you can help that person acknowledge that this is potentially a character flaw. This is something that is harming them in the workplace, or so that you can learn maybe there's something happening here that I don't know and I can help this person. So you investigate it and you handle it appropriately. We're not going to go into that today because that's not really what this episode is about. But I do want to make a little pit stop right here because there is another kind of psychological pitfall we can fall into, and it's called the devil or angel bias in the workplace. And it says that once we see someone in a pattern, maybe a short-term pattern of behavior that we don't love, right, that we associate with a character flaw, that from that point on, we have decided that that person can't do anything right. And I have been guilty of this. I've been guilty of this in the past. I had one specific employee and she really struggled to get her work right for a long time. And So it's very easy for me to find the flaws in her work and not really try to help her succeed. Now, the opposite is the angel bias, which is we can't see someone messing up because we've just decided in advance that they can't do anything wrong. And so as we're looking with eyes wide open at the behaviors that are coming in and out of our workplaces, in and out of our homes, wherever you find yourself in a leadership position, it's just good to be aware of both the angel and the devil bias, the on your shoulder talking in your ear, one ear in the other ear, to be able to see it clearly. Okay, how are you feeling? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling like, oh no, I think the worst in people? Well, if you do, then that's great, because we all do. And what an amazing thing if we could lead in acknowledging that. Again, friends, leadership is not perfection. It is so far from it. We put ourselves on these pedestals that honestly no one else is putting us on. So if we could acknowledge this is something that we struggle with, because everybody struggles with it, we can be aware of it, and we can be aware of it in others. How about that one-on-one when someone comes in and makes a character judgment about someone? It's easy to just agree or let it roll. But what if we stopped it? What if we were culture keepers by saying, we don't know all the facts here. We can't really make that assessment of their character. We can't really assume that it's ill intent, right? That would change our workplaces. It would change our homes, right? It would change the places that we find ourselves leading. So acknowledge the thoughts. Number one, hear it, see it happening. Don't claim to know what you don't know. And if there is repetitive behavior, investigate it and handle it. Be the Shaggy and the iced tea and plot twist. Figure out what's really going on. Well, I hope this was helpful to you today. It was really helpful for me in thinking it through. And if you enjoyed this episode, if you gained some insight, I would love it if you left a rating or review. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and drop a comment and tell me maybe something that really stood out to you, a new insight. And friends, I just want to encourage you, as you step forward one foot in front of the next, leading imperfectly, you are not alone and you are doing a great job. So hang in there, press on, and friends, let's talk next week. Have a good one.